All right, well, today is Friday, August 29th, 2008, and we are gathered at Lakewood Country Club in the members' dining room. And I'm Dave Cleveland, a member of the 2008 Memorabilia Committee, and along with Vic Ermel, the chairman, we're here to reminisce and have a conversation with a key member of the club's storied past, former head PGA professional, and life member, I should add, Jerry Boykin. Jerry, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here, and we appreciate it. And again, we just want to have a nice conversation with you, and very informal.
Great.
And, hopefully reminisce about your memories of this place and how you were influential and
a lot of them.
So maybe if we could get a little bit of your biography or your background, where you were born and.
Okay, yeah, I was born in Mississippi, Laurel, Mississippi,
Okay.
June 1st, 1931. I was a twin, and of course, it was destitute times then. We were the last of 6 children, and anyway, we had, the time we were 4, we lived out in the country, and my father had trouble getting work, but we didn't know he was ill, and he passed away when I was 4. So we, at the age of 48, and so in that interim, my mother didn't know what to do, so my brother immediately next to me, Curtis, he's 2 years older. He was 2 years older, and so they sent us to an orphanage for 6 years. They didn't know how to take care of anything. So anyway, it was a pretty good experience if you take it that way, but it was traumatic too. But so we came back to Laurel, and they had a wonderful school system, just one of the top school systems in the South. And anyway, that's one of the themes that I wrote one of my essays about. But anyway, that experience of growing up, and it had a wonderful group of people in that town of about 20,000 people. Good industry, it's a typical mid-depression problem of survival. And it had just a tremendous golf course. It was designed by a little-known designer at the time was Seymour Dunn, who later was a world recognized expert in teaching. He wrote the most seminal golf book on teaching in the 20s. He was a pro at upstate New York at the resort there. It escapes me now, but he was a wonderful player. The Dunn family, of course, they all came from Scotland. And he stopped in this little town on the way to New Orleans. He had 7 children. And he stopped, and they stopped a little tourist home, and he said, I like this place. It was in somewhere in the middle of December. Nice temperature, and he said, let me look around. And he saw this plot of land, and this is going to be the golf course. It was west of town. And he designed it. They hired him as the pro, and he designed it, and he was a pro there for like, I don't know, 10 years, in the late 1916 to 26. And it was such a good course that most of the touring pros made it a point to give exhibitions there during the 30s and 40s and 50s. And it was called by some Little Augusta. It had such an ambiance of the rolling gentle hills and the floral arrangements on the hillsides, and azaleas, camellias, magnolias, a wonderful setting, and a really tough golf course. And we had a lot of good players. I mean, they were better than some of the pros, actually. But there wasn't that much money in it. So I learned when I started caddying about 11 years old, I learned to caddy for these better players was really an experience, and to see how well they could do this, knowing how tough the game is. And so on and on we went through that period of time, and my brother and I caddied regularly, and we got 80, let's see, at first we got 50 cents for 18 holes.
50 cents?
Per bag.
Yeah. Okay.
They took a dime out for the caddy master. That was his salary. We
Okay.
paid the caddy master. But it was a good experience, and we had some really good tournaments there. And growing up, so at the high school, at Laurel High School, it turns out that my brother was quite an exceptional athlete, and I was too, actually. I lettered in 5 sports, and he was only 5'6", and he's a little smaller than I was, but probably the most gifted athlete I'd ever heard of or seen in that sense, what you'd call a natural.
Okay.
So anyway, we developed, I was a football player. He didn't like football, and he was a basketball expert and tennis, and he didn't play much golf. It was just something to earn a living. Turns out that when we were seniors in high school, he won, which was quite a feat. He was the most valuable player in the Big 8 basketball conference at 5'6". He was the leading scorer, basketball, and he won the state tennis singles championship and mixed doubles in 1 week, and the next week he won the state high school golf championship, all in a row.
Wow.
So he was an amazing athlete. So anyway, it was no, unfortunately, that summer we both qualified for the National Junior Amateur Championship in Houston, Texas, and he went to the finals against all these guys, Billy Casper, Gene Littler, and all those guys.
Oh, my God.
And he lost on the last hole. But the next day, driving back, the fellow that rode over from Laurel, it was just a terrible accident. He was not killed outright. He died a few days later, and so on. So it was a tragedy. So I went on, after we finished high school, I went on to Millsaps College, which is a small liberal arts school in Jackson, the capital. Very well recognized liberal arts school in the South. And I developed a golf team. They had a 9-hole golf course on this in the middle of the city that the Methodist Church owned, prime property. And they'd keep it up a little bit, and we mowed the greens with little hand mowers and so on. But it was fun to be there and be able to practice golf with no disturbances. And so the first year we had matches, I organized with one of the professors the first intercollegiate, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Mississippi Southern, and Mississippi, and got all of them all together. We'd have golf tournaments, meets, that first year. And the coach at Ole Miss, who was a good player, Junie Hovius, he was instrumental in making sure that it went through. And we played really good golf courses. So I just didn't know that I had that kind of organizational skill, but it worked out fine. And I had no plans to get into the golf business. I was going to teach history in high school, which I just, but my first contract was for $2,100, but I also had to coach 2 sports.
Oh, okay.
Included in that.
2 sports. What other sports were?
Golf and basketball.
And basketball.
Yeah. So anyway, I said, well, I really can't, we're getting ready to get married, I can't live on that. So I had an opportunity to play the final year in 55, I graduated, and with a fellow named Jim Coleman, who was the assistant pro at Oakmont, and to Lou Worsham. And I didn't know Lou Worsham, and I did know who he was because I remember reading of him making that eagle on the last hole at Tam O'Shanter back in 53 to win the highest prize in golf at the time. So I said to Jim, we played in the Mississippi Open at Laurel, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, well, I'm going to be traveling in the off season selling golf carts. That was unknown at the time. I mean, golf carts were infancy, and he was selling Victor carts. Remember the Victor Comptometer Corporation? They were the first electric carts. And Robert Trent Jones, the architect, had hired Lou. He had built a course in Fort Lauderdale, called Coral Ridge, and hired Lou as the pro with no contract or anything. And they got along so well at the U.S. Open in the '54 that or '53 when Hogan won it at Oakmont. So Lou, Jim says he called me on. He was there just before Christmas, or day or two after Christmas, in 56, 57, 56, because I was just married in the summer, and he said he called and said, "I got a job for you here in Fort Lauderdale." I didn't even know where Fort Lauderdale was. And he says, "You're going to be working for Lou Worsham and Robert Trent Jones." And I said, "Oh, that's great." So I just took off. I told my wife, "I got to go." And she had a teaching contract, so she did. But anyway, it worked out really well. It was a wonderful place, a lot of people with a lot of money, and you know, very nice, high quality people. A lot of them were from Cleveland, the original members, charter members, John Wasmer and some of those people.
Oh, yeah, Wasmer.
Mm-hmm. So it was a good experience to work for a fellow like Lou Worsham and Mr. Jones, and it was just, and I got to know so many wonderful players, top players, at that time. So the second year I was there, his top assistant said he was leaving to go to a club in Pittsburgh. The best, highest rated elite club was Fox Chapel Club, and he said, "You got to run this place now, because Lou he's our hunting and fishing pro." So I said, "All right, we'll do it." So I stayed there 9 seasons.
Wow.
It was a great place, and I got to know so many good players. And of course, later I worked a lot with Julius Boros, who was one of the top players of the time.
We found an article in the newspaper where it says Jerry Boykin helps Julius Boros. And the article was published with it. What was he looking for in advice? He's having problems with something, obviously.
Well, yeah, he lived right off the ninth green on the golf course, and he would walk across and hit his own balls and shag them. We had no caddies, and I was walking by one day between lessons, and he said, "Come on, watch this for a little bit." He was hitting a 4-iron, and I said, "What do you want me to look for?" You know, he was already a world-class player. He won the Open, and the Tam O'Shanter that Lou won in '52, and this was '57. I'd been there a year. But he said, "Just show me which way the club's going." His backswing. He wanted to know what his backswing plane was. And I wasn't really into a lot of the technical stuff about teaching, you know. And he said, "Well, is the club closed or open?" I said, "Well, it's closed." He said, "No, it's open." I said, "Well, that's when you fade it. When it's closed, you hit a fade. When it's open, you hit a hook." It's the opposite of what most people do.
Yes.
He had mirror vision, which we didn't know at that time until I discovered on other things later. His view of angles was reversed.
Oh, my goodness.
It was strange.
So, but if it was open, it was closed to him and just reversed.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
But and being such a good all-around player, his tendency, and that's all we did, is work on. Every person has certain tendencies or proclivities for error in swinging a golf club. You have to recognize them and find out and how they fit into the scheme of their swing. So I said, "Well, you tend to be what we call handsy. You take the club back with your hands too much, and now you've separated from the center, the body, the hub. Your turn is not doing the work, your body turn, torso." And that was his main tendency, because a lot of good players tend to get handsy, especially under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I know he was called Mr. Smooth.
Oh, his tempo was the greatest.
I mean,
It is smooth as silk. And I said, when you get a little faster, you get handsy. Okay, so you go hand in hand,
right,
so to speak. But he was a great guy, and he said, I don't want to know a lot about the mechanics of swinging a club. I want to maintain a feel feel for what I'm doing when I'm doing it well. Yeah, I don't care about what happens when you're doing it poorly. Anybody can do that. He was just fantastic player, and we would play matches, 9 holes every day that he was home from the tour, and I played 2 balls, he played 2 balls, and played 9 holes from the blue tees. That was the first course over 7,000 yards in Florida, and the balls didn't go very far then.
No.
Mm-hmm.
No.
7,000 yards from the blue tees.
Did you guys have a friendly little wager?
Oh yeah, definitely. You had to have something going every time. And the funny thing was, I was longer off the tee than he was. I could out-hit him, but until it came to a par 4 that's a longer par 4, or a par 5 you may could come close to, then he'd hit it 20 yards past me, just out of the blue. So I said, I've got to figure out how you do that. He said, it's simple. If you want to swing the ball farther, you swing easier, which is true. Yeah.
No less tension and higher club head speed.
And I didn't know that he was being entered after he won the Open in second time in '63 at Brookline, and they beat Palmer and Jackie Cupid in the playoff. And the curious thing about that was that we played it when we were playing this match in April. I was on the Hogan staff. I was one of the first club pros to be on Ben Hogan's staff, and I probably today am the oldest in terms of service on the Hogan staff in the country. So it started in '57, yeah. So they had sent me a set of clubs, and one was a new experimental club, a wedge called the Sure Out, and it was a totally different design, almost a precursor to the lob wedge, but it had a very extremely wide flange and a good bit of bounce. And I wasn't really that great a wedge player in that sense, but and he was, and so I said, and I hit a couple of shots in one match they were playing. They were pretty darn good, and he says, "Give me that club. Where'd you get that? You can't do it that well." So he hit a couple of shots, and he says, he stuck it in his bag. He says, "I'm going to win the Open with this," and he did. That 2 months later, yeah. And you could see it on television, the playoff, when he got it up and down from the tough fringes, heavy grass with that club.
And was this a Hogan club?
Hogan Sure Out, but he played Wilson for all his life, his career.
Okay.
So that's after he won that, they had the big celebration. I didn't know they had interviewed him, the sports writer for the Fort Lauderdale News, Bob Lynch, and he probed him out. And it turns out that they did a survey 2 weeks before the Open of all the South Florida pros. And I was the only one that picked him to win, of course. And so they ended up, he said, "Well, you must know something about this game." But I said, "No, I just know that he can hit the ball straighter than the rest of them, and he's the best short game. So that's what you have to have in the Open."
Right. Oh my goodness.
But he was a wonderful guy, and a good friend of Lou Worsham, of course. And Lou Worsham was a wonderful guy. If there is a storyteller better, I've never heard one. I mean, really wonderful stories. And he won quite a few tournaments as a club pro. Well, he won the U.S.
Pro.
Yeah, he won the U.S. Open. He won the World's Championship at Tam O'Shanter in '53. It was overshadowed